Hi guys, sorry I'm late for the meeting. I was in the hallway and I had to talk to somebody for almost 30 minutes. All right, so let's get started. Let me see who is here today. We have Harmon's here, Wendy, Lysandra, May, Christy, and then Sejing, Jojo. All right, so let's get started. We're gonna cover two chapters. So chapter 8 and chapter 9, chapter 10. Now again, just like before, guys, if you have any questions, send me a text me on the live chat box, and I'll answer them as soon as I see it. Okay. So chapter 9. All right. So chapter 9, I'm going to talk about this thing called aggregate demand. Now we talk about the regular demand curve, demand supply. Now the regular demand curve, that's for your demand for individual good or individual industry or individual companies. This aggregate demand is for the demand of everything you buy. So the total demand in the economy. And then let me see, we need to talk about some definitions. So the macro equilibrium, this is the equilibrium that we see in the economy between your total demand and total supply. Let me put this on maximum. All right, so macro equilibrium is between your something called an aggregate demand, that's the total demand of everything we buy, and an aggregate supply, which is the total supply of everything we have. Graph looks like this, and then something guys need to notice is that for this AD and AS curve on the vertical axis, that we don't have just price anymore. On the vertical axis, it's called the price level. Oh, you know what? I think I forgot to do the share screen. Been talking to myself. Here, 1 second. Share screen. All right. Much better. All right, so again, on the vertical axis is our price level, and the price level measures the average prices of every single buy. So remember from the previous chapters, we learned the CPI, that's your price level. So this is the average prices of everything we have. And then on the horizontal axis, we don't have quantity anymore, but this is called the real output. So real output, this is your real GDP. So it's the quantity of everything we're producing. So vertical axis is your price level, and the horizontal axis is your real GDP. It's the quantity of everything you're producing. Okay. And then for the macro equilibrium, that's the intersection between your aggregate demand curve and then your aggregate supply curve. Now you're going to see this QF very often. So the QF is then for your quantity produced at a full employment. So later on, you're going to learn something called a long run equilibrium or the long run aggregate supply curve. That's a vertical line like this. At this point, that's your long run or full employment output. So the economies, they tend to aggregate or tend to stay on this line over here. So this is the long run equilibrium. For your GDPs or for your aggregate demand curve, there are 4 components. So just like GDP, there are consumption, investment, government spending, and a net export. And then your net export, that's your export minus import. So anytime when these 4 components change, it will change our GDP. Let me go here. So first, let's look at consumption. So consumption is expenditure by consumers on all final good and service. And then for consumptions, we need to remember this formula here is that your disposable income equals to consumption plus savings. So how much money we have, so how much our income is, equals to our consumption, how much money you're spending out, plus how much money you're saving on the side. And then your consumption depends on the income. That for many consumers, the more money you have, the more money you spend. So, so this is going to know something called the APC, the average propensity to consume. So the average propensity to consume measures that for all the money you have, for all the total income you have, how much of your income that you are spending on consumption. That's your average propensity to consume. So suppose that for the entire month you make $1,000, and then you decide to spend 900, then your APC will be 90 or 0.9. So 90% of your income is all spent on consumption. And then currently for the US economy, our APC for the US economy is about 99%. So we only save 1% of the income, and then 99% of the money is all spent on consumption. Okay. All right, so next is called MPC. So MPC, that's your marginal propensity to consume. So for marginal propensity to consume is the change in your consumption over the change in your disposable income. And it's very similar to your average. So marginal, just the change at different level. Now MPS stands for the marginal propensity to save. So so if you take $1 extra income, if you spend 70 cents, and then you save 30 cents, well, together they're $1. So if you use the MPC plus the MPS, they will all equal to 1. The same thing goes to APC plus APS, that will equal to 1 too. Okay, so the marginal propensity to consume and the marginal propensity to save, together they equal to 1. And then for our consumption function, the first thing to learn is something called autonomous consumption. Autonomous consumption is the consumption part that's independent of your income. So it doesn't matter how much income you have, the money you spend on consumption, this is called autonomous consumption. So if you guys can think of anything that's like a bread and water, so those would be your autonomous consumption. So it doesn't matter how much income you have, we need bread and water, right? So that's our autonomous consumption. And then the second part is called income-dependent consumption. So one part of consumption is independent of income. The other part is just dependent on income, and it's called income-dependent consumption. And then the formula is very simple. It is B times YD. YD is actually income, and then B, this is your MPC. So the marginal propensity to consume times the additional income you have. So our our consumption function, so your consumption equals to autonomous consumption plus the MPC times your disposable income. And that's our consumption function. On this graph here, we're graphing our consumption function. So on the vertical axis is our consumption spending, and on the horizontal axis is our disposable income. And then we have this 45-degree line. So on this 45-degree line, that your consumption is equal to income. So on this line here, your saving is equal to 0. And anytime you're to this part of the line, you're going to have a negative saving. And anytime you're on this part, you're going to have a positive saving. So if your consumption, so this blue line here is our consumption function. So when the consumption function is higher than the 45-degree line, that means we're spending too much money. If you're spending too much money, more than what you have, more than your income, that means you borrow money. So we call this saving. And then vice versa, that if you on this side of the line over here, that when your 45-degree line is higher than your consumption function, that means we're saving some money, and that's your saving part of the consumption. Okay. All right. Next, let's go through this. Not important. All right. So here's some factors can shift your consumption, which means it will also shift our AD curve. So anytime if your income is changing, this will change your consumption. And then this will also shift your aggregate demand level. And then anytime if your expectation change, this will shift your consumption function, also ED line, your wealth, your credit conditions, your tax policies. All this will cause effect in your consumption, and then which means it will shift your aggregate demand curve. And then just like before with your regular demand curve, if it's increasing, it's shifting to the right. If it's decreasing, it will be shifting to the left. Let me see. So Harmon says it stopped working. Harmon, what do you mean by stop working? Specify, okay? All right. Next is investment. So investment is expenditure on new plants, equipment, and structures the company have. Also, this is any change into to your inventory. Now remember, investment is everything you do that can increase your future sales or future production. That's investment. And then for investment, this will include both the fixed investment and also inventory investment. Okay, so fixed investments, anytime company adding new plants, new equipment, new tools, that's a fixed investment. And the inventory investment, that's just when company have unsold inventory, we're gonna sell them for next time or next year. This will increase our next year sale. So that's another part of investment too. And then for investment is inversely related to the interest rate. So this is thing about investment. That for investment, companies need to borrow money for investment. So if the interest rate is higher, that means the cost of borrow money is also higher. So companies tend to borrow less money. So investment goes down. Now, vice versa, if your interest is very, very low, so it's cheap to borrow money, then company borrow more money, then investment is going upward. So investment is inversely related to our interest rate. And if you graph the investment, this is the investment function. So your interest rate on the vertical axis and the level of investment on the horizontal axis. So they're inversely related. Okay. Another big factor for investment is the expectation for futures. So if company expect the future sales is good, then company will tend to have more planned investment, so increase investment to the right. And then vice versa, if a company expect the future is going to be very bad, nobody will buy anything from them, and they're going to reduce the investment, and therefore investment shifting to the left. And the next one is government spending. So government spending here, this is how much our government is spending on their purchase. And then the government spending is independent of price level. So government doesn't care about what the price is. Government has a fixed budget. So it's a budget requirement for government. Now last one is net export. So it's export minus import. So again, guys, remember this net export, if anytime your export is more than import, this is positive. Anytime if your import is more than export, then this is negative. So Markov failure is anytime that you're away from this full employment output. So anytime that if you have a recession, that's a market failure. And anytime if your economy is doing very good, which can also be bad in the future, that's called inflationary gap. So this two need to remember. So something called a recessionary gap and an inflationary gap. Recessionary gap, that's when economy slows down, we produce less stuff, and then your real GDP goes down. That's a recessionary gap. And the inflationary gap is when the economy produces too much good, and then the price level is increasing. So this is called an inflationary gap. So this obviously causes inflation in the economy. So let's look at some example here. So so suppose that your economy is on this level. So this is the perfect economy. That right now we're at this full employment output, and then you have your price level over here. And then suppose something happens. Let's suppose that your consumption goes down. So consumption goes down, we're going to shift our AD curve to the left. So go to AD2. Now at AD2, you're going to have a new Markov equilibrium. Now this equilibrium here, if you compare it to your full employment output, your production is less, so quantity of production goes down. At the same level, your price level is decreasing as well. But we're going to focus on this part here, that your production is going down. So when the production is going down, that means company don't have to produce as much as good before. So company reduce number of supply, and then therefore they have more layoff, and so unemployment will be increasing. So the downside of the recessionary gap is that this will be creating more unemployment in the economy because the output is less. Now, vice versa, that suppose our consumption increase, so AD curve is shifting to the right. When it's shifting to the right, this is our new equilibrium. At this new equilibrium, if you compare your output at QE, your output is more, so economy is producing a lot of stuff, which is not bad. But the problem is this over here, that your price level is increasing. So when the CPI is increasing, this is called inflation, and inflation is bad. Okay, so too much inflation is associated with this inflationary gap. All right, let's see, we have Priscilla's here. So we talk about this. We talk about this. All right, so that's it for chapter 9. Does anybody have any question for chapter 9? All right, no questions. Then we talk about chapter 10. Chapter 10. All right, so chapter 10 is on the self-adjustment or instability. Let's talk about the Great Depression. So recession is anytime the economy slows down for 2 consecutive quarters. That's called recession. Depression is anytime you have 4 consecutive quarters of lower GDP. That's a depression. So we have recessions about every 5 to 7 years, and then but depression is very rare. We only had 1 depression so far, and that's the Great Depression back in 1929. And then in the 1930s, we had this economist. His name was John Maynard Keynes, and then Keynes said that the classical assertion of the economy that would self-adjust is wrong. That the economy wouldn't self-adjust, and then if something happened to the economy actually will be getting worse and worse and worse. And then it was during the Great Depression, Keynes really had a good theory, because in the Great Depression, that for the economy, it's more about your supply, demand, your numbers, your price and quantity. More than often, it's also about human psychology, our human expectation. So if our expectation for the future is changed, so our psychology changed, this will change your economy fundamentally. And then it's very hard for the economy to self-adjust if our expectation for the future is changed. So let's look at how this really works. So we remember this, the circular flow diagram. It shows how the economy works with your resource and also your monetary, your money. Now, this diagram, the one we learned before in the previous chapters, wasn't a complete diagram. So now we're going to add in the leakage and also the injection into the economy. So leakage, you guys think about all the money we have. Leakage is anytime the money is leaving the economy. So anytime if you have savings, you have import, you have taxes you're gonna pay. So those are the money that are actually leaving the economy. And then for injection, there's the additional money coming into the economy. So every time you have your export, if you have your government spending, your investment spending, those will be the additional money that's coming into the economy. And then for the classical economists, so this is before 1930s, their belief is that leakage will always equal to your injection. Then whatever happens, not only will the economy self-adjust, but our saving will also equal the investment. Well, the argument is this, that suppose your saving is more than your investment, so we'll have more money available. When more money available, the interest rate will go down. So when the interest rate goes down, that means it's cheaper to borrow money. Then we're going to borrow more money, so investment go up. So eventually, your saving will equal to investment. And then vice versa, if your investment is more than saving, that means we want to borrow more money, and then there are less money available to be borrowed. So the interest rate goes up. When interest rate goes up, we save more money, and then your investment will become more expensive, the investment become less, and then eventually this will equal again. So saving also equal to investment. So according to the classical economists, the economy by itself will always self-adjust to this equilibrium, that your leakage will always equal to your injection. But however, remember King says that if our economy's expectation change, this will change our economic outlook. So suppose saving is increasing, consumption goes down. Now remember the GDP, there's four component, right? Your consumption, investment, government spending, and net export. And then consumption is the biggest component. So every time you save money, that's a leakage. So there's money going out of the economy, which is bad. So consumption goes down, and then consumption goes down, your GDP goes down. And when GDP goes down, your business outlook is bad, so which means business reduce number of investment. So investment goes down even more, and then GDP goes down even further. So GDP in this case didn't recover, actually went down even more. So this is what happened when the business outlook or the business expectation is changed. And the expectation is a big part of our financial investment. And another argument for the classical economists is that they're arguing that anytime if you have companies who have unsold good, so if your inventory is increasing, well, if inventory is increasing, this will trigger falling prices. So price goes down, then inventory goes away, right? But again, if our consumer expectation change, your inventory wouldn't go away just because the price is going down. So according to Keynes, this is his argument that when the inventory is increasing, supposedly more should be bought at lower prices. But however, as price goes down, profit is going away. So company receive less profit. When company receive less profit, they're going to reduce the production, so produce less, and also eliminate your investment plan. So your investment goes down, and then your production goes down. When production goes down, company doesn't need that many employees anymore. So many people will be laid off. So more layoff around. So which means our income will go down. So if income goes down and a higher unemployment, then we don't want to buy more stuff anymore. So even though price is lower in this case here, that we don't have income anymore, then nobody buys any more good. So at the lower prices doesn't always mean that your unsold inventory will be all sold out. It's that at lower prices that this is very bad for the economy. So this is like a snowball effect. The economy getting worse and worse and worse. So this is also one argument against deflation. So inflation is bad, but deflation is even worse. So when price goes down, company cutting back, more unemployment, our income goes down, we don't buy anything anymore, and you go back to the lower prices. So it's a never-ending effect. That's a snowball effect getting worse and worse and worse. All right, we'll talk about this. All right, so let's suppose we had this multiplier effect, and let's see how this really works. So not only does the lower prices or any decrease in one component of your GDP has that effect by itself, but it also has a multiplier effect or ripple effect. Okay, so let's suppose we start with a decrease in investment by $100 billion. So right away, investment goes down. So so go to step two. That means you're gonna have $100 billion of unsold good. When you have unsold good, so business sell less good, and then they will cut back on employment and wage, and then our income goes down by $100 billion. Now let's suppose that our consumption. So let's suppose we have consumption equals to. I can't think of this right now. Well, let's just scrap this, okay? So remember consumption have two parts, the autonomous consumption and also your income dependent consumption. Let's suppose for the income dependent consumption, when the income goes down by $100 billion, our consumption decreased by $75 billion. So we still spend $25 billion by our necessities, so your bread, your waters, your butters, but all the other stuff we don't buy anymore. So consumption goes down by $75 billion, and then which means your business receive less money. So sales goes down by $75 billion. They'll cut back even more for employment and wage, and then our income goes even lower. And then for the next level, our consumption goes down even more. So this is keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going until it stops at the very last step. But this is all started with $100 billion less of investment. So this is called a multiplier effect, also called a ripple effect. So one little drop in investment, it causes multiple ripples in the economy. Let's keep going. So to find a multiplier for this multiplier effect, this is the formula for it. So it's 1 divided by 1 minus MPC. Again, MPC, this is your marginal propensity to consume. So suppose your MPC is 0.75, then your multiplier effect is 1 divided by 1 minus 0.75. So just 4. Okay, so that means $1 change in your initial investment will lead to a $4 change in your GDP. Let's skip this. Okay, so guys, this is important here. So your total change in spending equals to your multiplier times the initial change in aggregate spending. So before the example we had was $100 billion of lower GDP or lower investment. That if your multiplier is 10, this led to $1,000 billion of lower in your total spending in the economy. We talk about this. All right, so again, recessionary gap is anytime if your GDP, if your aggregate demand level is to the left of your full employment output, and then the difference between the production here, that's called a recessionary gap. And then for inflationary gap, it's the difference between your production that's to the right of your full employment production, and then this difference here, this is called the inflationary gap. Now, inflationary gap, even though you're producing more good, but you are having an inflation in the economy, which is bad. Okay, and then next chapter, we're going to study the long run equilibrium. You're going to see that in the long run, that even though your production is increased, but the long run, it will go back to your full employment output. But the problem is that once you go back, your price level will end up even higher. So you're going to be having a very high inflation for the economy. All right, so this is also called demand pull inflation. So when the demand is very high, we want to buy more stuff, and then which causes inflation to go up. That's a demand pull inflation. So this happens when you have a excess aggregate demand. And then, so it's not mentioned here. There's also something called a supply pull inflation, or cost push inflation. So cost push inflation, that if you have your let's see your aggregate demand versus supply. So this is AD curve, this is AS curve. If your AS curve is decreased, and then you're going to end up at a higher price level, so P1, P2, then this increase in inflation is called a cost push inflation. So that's why you have two when the AS curve is going down. Okay, so with AS curve going down, you have a cost push inflation. When you have an AD curve going up, you're going to have a demand pull inflation. All right, let's okay, so that's it for chapter 10. Does anybody have any questions at this point for chapter 10? No questions? All right, let me do a head count. Let's see who is here. Okay, we have Priscilla's here, Christine, Harmon, May's here, Sejing, Jojo, Sandra, Wendy. Okay, all right, guys. So sorry I couldn't be here on time today. But again, if you have any questions, send me an email and I'll be more than happy to help you on the questions. Okay. So good luck on your assignment, and then I will see you guys this time next week, and hopefully I'll be back here on time next week. All right, talk to you later. Bye bye.